This is the deposition of Kevin Morris, Hunter Biden's lawyer, brought into Congress in Washington, D.C. for a sit-down deposition. He was there with his lawyers. The date this happened, January 18th, 2024. Oversight Committee, Judiciary Committee, Ways and Means Committee, all present. You see a lot of the representatives we're familiar with. We've got Comer's there, Smith from Missouri, Jim Jordan, Bishop, Biggs, Van Dunn, Sparts, Raskin's there, Crockett, you know her, and Goldman from the left. So we've got Kevin Morris is here. Everybody's making their introductions. Now, Kevin Morris actually made a statement. So Mr. Morris, Hunter Biden's lawyer, he says, I'm voluntarily appearing here today, Congress, to answer any questions about my relationship with Hunter. Hunter is my client and one of my closest friends. I was first introduced to Hunter at a campaign event for VP Joe in winter 2019. A week later, I was asked to help him with some potential legal issues in the entertainment industry. A few weeks after the fundraiser, I went to Hunter's house in LA. We spoke for 4 or 5 hours about legal issues and other problems he was facing at the time. When I first met Hunter, he was emerging from the lowest point in his life. He's had a lot of low points. Now, at this time, he had no income and his wife, Melissa, was 5 months pregnant. Although he was being harassed by paparazzi, as well as people coming onto his property and threatening him, he had no security protection. In general, I was concerned that Hunter did not have the level of support that he needed, and I stepped in to assist. What a nice guy. I've worked hard to create a life that has allowed me to help my family and my friends when they've needed it, and so I did so with Hunter. In addition to legal advice and friendship, over the course of the past 4 years, I have loaned Hunter Biden money to help him through his difficulties. When needed, at all times, we have had our separate attorneys advise us on these transactions, which is very curious because, you know, generally lawyers are not supposed to fund their clients. They're supposed to
prohibit it, like California bar rules. But
California bar rules. Yeah, and there's good reason for that because you want a separation between the two. You don't want to commingle funds, and you also don't want lawyers kind of acting as investors into their clients, hoping to get, you know, a settlement. And you can do that, but in very like you got to have a trust account. You got to have, you know, like personal injury contingency fees. There's a whole structure on this so that everything's reported and it's all very clear. And
you can be sure you don't have that.
You can get in big trouble if you violate any of these, like lose your law license. So he's playing a very prickly game here. Now, with respect to the loans, I am confident that Hunter Biden will repay, which is very interesting because he doesn't have a history of that. It says, I did not and do not have any expectations of receiving anything from Hunter's father or the Biden administration in exchange for helping Hunter, nor have I asked for anything from Joe or his administration. My only goal was and is to help my friend and my client. A final word. Kevin Morris, Hunter's lawyer, says, this is America. And in this country, there is no prohibition against helping a friend in need, despite the incapacity of some to imagine such a thing. And he's looking at all the Republicans up there. Says, thank you. And so the response is, thank you, sir. Now the majority gets their line of inquiry starting now. Any thoughts, you know, Garrett, on the initial opening statement? Anything stand out?
No. Again, it's right in line with their narrative. Hunter's an addict. He can't be held responsible for the things he's done. And he was a real businessman at one point, which we know is a lie.
We do. So the question for Kevin Morris, Hunter's lawyer. Mr. Morris, can you give us an overview, background, education? I know you had quite a career. Can you tell us about it? He says, yeah, I went to Penncrest High School, Pennsylvania, Cornell, got out of there, got out by the skin of my teeth, 1985, went directly to NYU Law School, spent a term at the London School of Economics when I was at Cornell. After bouncing around, I moved to LA. I started practicing entertainment law. Then I went out on my own. I grew a firm. The firm still exists, but I retired, semi-retired. And in 2021, we had 25 lawyers and 50 employees. We've done pretty well. What was the name of the law firm? So a lot of different names, but no, it was the law firm of Kevin Morris. And Kevin Yorn. Is that Mr. Yorn? Yeah. And how long were you partners with Yorn and Levine? 25 years. Are you still working at your law firm? No. What's your job now? What are you doing for a living? Well, I continue to practice under my sole practitioner business called Kevin Morris PC. And then when I retired, I formed two businesses. One was a production company called Media Courthouse Documentary Production. And then I started a business in Pennsylvania, private equity for small businesses. And we put a big priority on charitable contributions. I want to turn now to when you first met Hunter. I know you touched upon this in your statement, but can you give us a time frame on when you first met Hunter? I think it was at the end of November 2019. And when did this occur? Where? That was at a house in Brentwood. What was going on at the house at the time that you met Hunter? It was a fundraiser for VP Daddy Joe. At this fundraiser, did people have to pay to be there? Yes. Well, I don't know if they had to, but there was a contribution. Did you contribute? Yes. And the contributions, they were going to Joe for Prez? Yeah. Can you recall who else was at the fundraiser? Not really. You know, my partner was there and the host was there. Well, who was the host? Ah, that's Lynette Phillips is the name. And who is Lynette Phillips? Well, I believe she's in the music. She's a music manager and maybe she manages some artists, but I did not know that Lynette well at all at that time. And who invited you to the fundraiser? Lynette, through my accountant who she was friends with.
That's where I can add value. The accountant's name is Lindsay Weinberg. It's a male. The last name is spelled differently. Lindsay, Lindsay, usually it's Wein, but this is wine, as in like the drink, Weinberg, Lindsay Weinberg. We have a complete dossier on him that I can talk more about.
Amazing. Okay, so they're all, at their cocktail parties recommending everybody goes. And this
Big
is
Democrat, all leftist.
Exactly. So, and approximately how many people were there? He says, oh, basic, 50 people. How long did you stay? We left after Joe spoke. What did he speak about? Well, his vision for the country. Now, at the photo, did you have an opportunity to speak with Joe? He said, I was in the photo line at the end of it. And when it was my turn, I said, hi, Joe. Someone in the background said, Mr. Vice President. And then Joe said, call me Joe. And that was it. So who introduced you to Hunter? Well, I believe it was Lynette on my way out. Can you describe the interaction and what she said? Hunter, Kevin, I was meeting a couple people at the same time. Was there any more to that conversation at that time? No. So the first time you met Hunter, it was at this fundraiser for Joe. And as you're leaving, it's just a hello, nice to meet you. That's all? Yeah. And just for the timeline, that's in winter 2019. Is that true? You believe it's November 2019? Yeah. What triggered the events that led you to speak to Hunter again? It says, well, Lynette called her friend, my accountant, Weinberg, and asked if I would go to see Hunter. And I think I talked to her then. She said, he's got some entertainment issues, and would I go talk to him? All right. Was this by phone, you said? I think so. Did Lynette Phillips on that phone call bring up anything other than just Hunter Biden's entertainment issues? No. I mean, it was pretty obvious that he was in other issues. He had other issues going on. What happened after she asked you if you talked with him? Did you get his phone number, or how did you proceed from there? No, she set it up a few days later. A few days later, I went to his house and I met with him. Without giving his address, where was the house? LA. And I'm assuming at that time that you're not paying for any expenses, correct? No, he just met him. So how much time passed between the campaign event where you initially met him, November 2019, and then when you had this phone call where Lynette says, hey, can you go talk to Hunter? He says a week went by. Did there come a time when you reached out to Hunter, or excuse me, when you had this phone call with Hunter? When was that? Sullivan, lawyer, jumps in, re-asks the question. So when did this meeting occur between you and Hunter? A couple days after the phone call. Was Lynette there? Not that I recall. And can you tell us about what happened during that meeting? Now, Sullivan, lawyer, jumps in, says, hey, we already talked about this. I just want to be clear. Is that Sullivan, or it's not a congressperson, right? Is that a lawyer?
No, that is a lawyer. You're right.
That's a lawyer, yeah. We're going to see a lot of that. And that's because we don't really know what Kevin Morris is. He's a friend. He's Democratic donor. As we've seen, he's already shown up and donated. And he's also a lawyer. So it's like he invokes this force field, this attorney-client privilege force field, when he gets into some lines of questioning that he doesn't want to answer about. His lawyer's doing it for him. So any information that would be the subject matter of that meeting would be attorney-client relationship, right? So he goes over to meet with Hunter, whole thing's off the limit. Says, can I ask a question while you were dealing with this? Now, Mr. Morris, this is Biggs from Arizona. I don't want to misquote you. I'm just trying to write down what you said. But when you talked with Miss Phillips, you said that she had some entertainment issues, right? So you were going to get together to talk about entertainment issues. And I think I got this right. It's pretty obvious he had other issues. Why was that obvious? Well, he said it was in the press. Okay. Well, what was in the press at the time? But there was no specific, or I don't have anything. Okay. So this is coming from outside, nothing from a conversation that you knew that Hunter was in problems? No. Okay. That's what I wanted to find out. Thanks. And I just want to put some guardrails around here as well. My understanding, says this redacted person, is Lynette Phillips calls him to say that there's entertainment legal issues, right? Not just entertainment issues, like he can't access his, accounts on the internet, but actual legal issues. I'm not going to ask questions about his legal matters. If they represent, okay.
It'll come up later, but very important to set the stage. They're going to ask Morris, have you ever been in court with Hunter Biden? And obviously you can be somebody's attorney and not represent them in court. However, it's much different that if you have a history of being in court with somebody, it's much easier to righteously claim attorney-client privilege when you're discussing motions and real litigation. These are just friends, and they're using their JDs as an excuse not to disclose something. It's so different. If you're representing somebody in a trial, civil or criminal, I think it's much more reasonable to say that you have a privilege. There's obviously the crime fraud exception, which you've talked about at great length, Corcoran and everything, but that needs to be pierced here. Morris and Hunter cannot be allowed to hide behind this.
Right. There's indicia of an attorney-client relationship. Like, do you have a fee agreement? Do you define what the scope of your representation is? Have you done any actual legal work? Like, did he send a letter of representation? Did he send an email? Is he keeping time logs? Is he billing, against a retainer? What happened with the monetary stuff? Is it going into his billing bank account? Like, all of these things. And based on what it sounds like, there's a lot of overlap between all of these things, which is a big no-no. You're supposed to keep that stuff separate.
Yes.
So he says, well, I think I can clarify this. And then they allow him to answer. So again, we're treading the line between privilege and not? He says, well, I went out. When I first got there, I wanted to look at his art. You should. Yeah, he bought a lot of money of it. I'm an art collector, and at that time, I knew it was important to him. After we met, we spent a while looking through his stuff, and I was impressed. And then shortly, I met Melissa, and I saw that she was, pretty pregnant. She made us some tea or whatever, and then Hunter and I just began a very long talk, and I just said, tell me what's going on. And then we spoke for 5 hours, and I began representing him at that moment. And my understanding of the rules of professional responsibility and so on is that's how you do it. That's how you can do it. And so there are also arguments that you don't necessarily need a written fee agreement in some contexts because maybe you don't have time to get it and stuff like that. But as a matter of practice, lawyers, the best practice is to memorialize your legal representation in a fee agreement.
A simple email after the meeting, but I guarantee
simple meeting, right? Something to memorialize it. It's best practices. Anyways, so during those discussions, did you discuss Hunter's debts, including any type of loans that you would end up paying on later for him? Can we split that question up? He says, sure. Talking about debts, though, falls under attorney-client privilege, so we're not going to be able to talk about that. Talking about any loans Kevin would have made, I guess, is that a fair question? Okay, I'll start with the latter. Kevin, did you discuss any of the loans that you would eventually pay for Hunter during that meeting? No. And I just want to get into your practice as an actual lawyer. How many notices of appearances have you filed in federal or state court for the past 3 years for clients? And a notice of appearance is exactly what it sounds like. It's notifying the court that you're appearing on behalf of a client. It's basically how you start a case. Somebody gets charged with a crime. There's an open case file, an open docket. So the lawyer sends in something to notify the court that you're there. He says, thank God, none. How many depositions have you represented clients in the past 3 years? In the past 3 years? None. Have you ever appeared in any courts on behalf of Hunter or any other clients in the past 3 years? No, I don't do that, mister. Okay, so it's fair to say that you're not a tax lawyer either, correct? And you've never represented a client in federal criminal law before. Would you agree with me on that? Well, I don't know if that's true. I was a litigator for a while after I got out of law school. I did a lot of things. Well, you'd remember if you did federal criminal law, I think. But in the past 3 to 5 years, you never represented a federal criminal defendant? No. And you're not a divorce lawyer either. Is that right? Correct. And you're not an expert on state court proceedings in Arkansas about alimony, are you? Would that be correct? Well, what do you mean by expert? Well, you're not an attorney. You couldn't go to Arkansas court and represent him because you're not, well, I am an attorney. Well, not an Arkansas attorney, are you? I'm not admitted in Arkansas, but it doesn't mean I don't know. I'm not familiar with the proceedings in the courts of Arkansas. Okay, so on what specific matters did you represent Hunter Biden in then, Kevin? If you don't do any of those things, which many of them Hunter Biden is now going through legally, what did you represent him in? And the reason this is important is because you're sitting here in front of members saying that you can't answer a question because of privilege issues. So I think it's fair for us to understand what are the contours of your representation of Hunter. He says, counsel, in my job, I represent high-profile individuals. Profile. High-profile individuals have basically virtual corporations. And in those virtual corporations, they have all kinds of staff and assistants, agents and managers, publicists, whatever. And what I do is oversee. I oversee sort of the squad, sort of like general counsel, but I'm involved in everything. And the same is with Hunter. If you check my retainer agreements, which he mentions, you'll see that it says all matters, and that's it. Which again, it's like, all right, it's questionable.
Have you ever had this arrangement before?
Would be another good one.
I've not had this arrangement before. Do you think that's influenced by the fact that this guy's father is the president of the U.S.?
Right. I would absolutely think so. Yeah, he wants a blanket thing, so he's Hunter Biden's number 2.
His fixer.
His fixer, which is why he's got to be involved in everything. And the broader the scope of the agreement is, the more force field protection he has. He can now invoke it for everything. So question, are you able to tell us when the retainer agreement was executed? He says later in 2020, I don't know. Actually, I don't know. I don't remember. But there is a retainer agreement in place between you and Hunter. There was 2. And a conflict waiver? Well, and a conflict waiver. And so a conflict waiver is like, your attorney might have a conflict of interest, but you waive that.
Do you know what is also relevant? I'm chiming in here not to interrupt, but to say that Brian Sullivan, the guy who's representing Morris in this deposition right here, he also represents Hunter. So I guarantee you they had to, if they were doing things legally, they had to sign a waiver for Brian Sullivan to represent them both. I mean, we have to do the same thing with Marco Polo, right?
Yeah.
It's easy because the interest of Marco Polo and the interest of Garrett coincide, but sometimes in other matters they don't.
Right. So what Garrett's talking about is lawyers, have obligations to their clients. And if you have 2 clients that might point their fingers at each other. So for example, if Hunter points his fingers at Kevin and Kevin points his fingers at Hunter, now you've got one lawyer representing the both of them. Now they've got a direct conflict and the lawyer essentially has to get off both cases, right? So when there's conflicts like that, the clients can waive that conflict knowingly though. And so they've executed that because they're keeping it all close to the vest, which I think is, which is the right play. Try to keep it all bundled up.
They're doing as much as they can to maintain plausible deniability. security.
Yep.
Except for that damn laptop. The
Yep.
laptop shatters everything, and that's why I'm so obsessed with it. One thing that got under Morris's skin is he never wargamed for this. Remember, Morris was going to rehabilitate Hunter in 2019. He starts a documentary company. He's going to tell the story of the resurrection of Hunter Biden, and the laptop shits on that.
It's amazing work.
That's why he hates me so much, because we put out this dossier on the laptop. He hates that.
Here's the answer. In my connection with representation of people, we often hire lawyers for different matters. It's my job to oversee that, and I'm involved in each piece. They sort of report to me. So the question was, has Hunter Biden paid you for your legal services? He says, sorry, the payment of the fee, that's attorney-client privilege. That's a no-go. Jim Jordan jumps in. Does Abby Lowell report to you, Kevin Morris? Again, cuts him off. Any information Mr. Morris would have. Jordan says, no, he said he hires lawyers and they report to him. And I'm just asking if that lawyer specifically reports to Kevin, Abby Lowell. But Mr. Jordan, I said it with respect to my other clients in the past, with respect on this issue. This is Kevin. Abby does not report to me. Jordan says, okay. Question for Kevin. Now, you represented everyone here, that you're Mr. Hunter's attorney. You became his attorney on day one, I believe, of your meeting for all of the matters. And I'm sure you're aware that there are ethical rules in place on lawyers if they are to give loans to their clients, right? Yeah. So I'd like to get into the loans themselves. It's been reported and referenced in court filings that you loaned millions of dollars to Hunter. Is it true that you loaned millions of dollars to Hunter? Yeah, it's true. Are you able here today to tell us how much money you've loaned to him? I'm not sure the exact amount. We total up the amount periodically and update the notes. So his bookkeeper is like, how much more is Hunter spending at all the residences that he's putting him up in on his cable bills? Are you aware of the most recent updated amount that you reported? I don't remember, So question, we sent you a letter. Our committee sent you a letter. In the letter we discussed, we're going to talk about the loans. I sent this to your lawyer too. Now you're the attorney for Hunter who represented him since day one. And I just want to be clear, sitting here, you did not prepare as his lawyer. You did not prepare to know the total amount of loans that you've given Hunter when that was going to be the subject of the interview. So you don't have any idea? Like you didn't do your homework? No, not to the number. Okay, well then let's go through them. He says, if we could, let's go to exhibit number 1. He gives it to him. He says, I want to direct you to paragraph 17. Now we're looking at the indictment in California, dated December 7th. Please let me know when you've read paragraph 17. He says, I've read it. So just for the record, Chairman Smith walked into the room. He's on Ways and Means. And he says, we're going to go into it. Paragraph 17 says, from January through October 15th, this is the DOJ speaking, an entertainment lawyer from Hunter's indictment, aka a personal friend called Kevin Morris, provided to Hunter with substantial financial support, approximately $200,000 to rent a lavish house on a canal in Venice, California, $11,000 in payments for his Porsche and other individual items. In total, Hunter had Kevin Morris pay over $1.2 million to third parties for Hunter's benefit from January through October 15th of 2020. So they just read the indictment, which I absolutely love that. Oh, you don't remember the number? Let me show you the criminal indictment against Hunter. To begin, are you the personal friend that's referenced here? Kevin says, counsel, I don't, it doesn't name me. I don't suppose to know what the prosecutors are saying here. Okay, no, but are you the person who's named here, Kevin? Did you give these loans to Hunter? Again, counsel, I don't have the numbers in front of me. I told you, I loaned Hunter money. And again, my name is not in there. It's an important document. It's a federal indictment, and I don't want to say anything about it. So this indictment, it doesn't say Hunter Biden's lawyer, does it? It refers to you as a personal friend. And some people jump in. One at a time, says the court reporter. Shout out to our court reporters. We love our court reporters here. Sullivan says, okay, you had assumed that. You made an assumption when you said it refers to you. Mr. Morris hadn't said that it refers to him. He's not willing to say that because he didn't write the indictment. Kevin says, I'm confused. You're asking him to make an assumption. He says, sorry, I'm confused. It says an entertainment lawyer, says Kevin Morris. But it referred to you as a personal friend. He says, no, but you're an entertainment lawyer, right? And you're a personal friend? Yeah. Of Hunter Biden? Yeah. And you're the one who provided payments and loans to Hunter for a canal in Venice, right? Yeah. And you also provided loans for Hunter to pay for a Porsche, right? Well, not exactly. The Porsche was upside down and he was trying to get rid of it and he was behind, so it was upside down. He couldn't give it back until he paid the $11,000. Well, you don't dispute between January and October of 2020, you gave Hunter loans that totaled over $1 million, do you? He says, again, I don't have the exact numbers, but I don't dispute that. And just so we have the timeline, you meet Hunter Biden at a Joe Biden campaign event, November 2019, approximately, and then the loans start going out to Hunter in January 2020. Is that correct? I believe so. So within 6 weeks and 2 months of meeting Hunter, through Lynette Phillips, you start giving out loans to him. Is that true? Yeah, I started lending Hunter Biden money. That was almost always direct payments to third-party vendors. And yeah, it was within a month. Those loans at this point, did you have an agreement in writing as to how those loans would be repaid as of January 2020. As of that date, no. We documented the retainer agreement, whatever you're saying. And again, I don't know if that's an official document or an email or whatever, but I was acting as a lawyer, sure. Okay, that's not my question though. There's different agreements in place. You had a retainer agreement, which I'm not asking about. You have a loan agreement, which you said in your opening statement that was agreed upon between your attorney, a separate attorney, and Hunter's separate counsel. You said that in your opening statement. So I'm asking now about the loan agreement, okay? The repayment. Was that loan agreement, was that in place in January 2020 when you first began giving loans to Hunter? No, we documented it a little later. Okay, what does a little later mean? When is that? I don't remember. Was it a year later? Was it 6 months later? Might have been. Counsel says, are you referring to the written agreement? Yeah, it's a written loan agreement. So again, just to clarify, because your attorney asked, but I want you to answer it again. It's your testimony that in January 2020, when you first began giving loans to Hunter, there was no written loan agreement in place at the time. Is that right? And now I'd like to go to Big
Robert,
says,
I have a question for you. If Morris decides to forgive these, does he have to pay gift tax on that 5.9? That's a legal question I can't answer.
Yeah, that would be a tax attorney question, but yes, I would think so. They would have to classify it as something, right? If it's not a loan,
If he forgives the loan,
I think you still have to declare that becomes taxable. So I think it's the same issue. Like if the federal government waives your student loans or something, you're talking about the benefit to the person. And if you're going to repay a loan back, then that is consideration. For tax purposes, I think the IRS would require him to pay a gift tax on that. And again, I'm not a tax attorney and that stuff makes my brain fry. But yeah, I think it wouldn't be a loan. It would be a gift and there would be a consequence to that. But I could be wrong.
we should do a deep dive on that because that's what's going to happen. There's no way he gets that liquid cash except if Joe dies.
Yeah, I don't know how they're going to try to structure it, or like what is that $875,000 art purchase going to go on his tax records as? And what are these loans going to go into his tax, his business filings as? How are they going to classify all this stuff? The next question is, would the IRS or the DOJ do anything about it anyways, since they've been covering up for him for years now? But although they're charging him now, so maybe that.
I think that, let's put it this way, the Delaware charge is stupid. They should get him on drugs before they get him on the gun thing. The gun charge is stupid. The California one has teeth. It's still a limited hangout, but we have to be objective. And the California one is legitimate. I mean, there's so much felonious activity there.
Yeah, there's a lot of comments in the chat, people saying, yeah, you can gift a certain amount, but if it's a forgiven debt, it is taxable. I think that's the general answer on it. Tax code is very complicated. I took it in law school. The tax code book is like 2 of the Marco
That would
Polo
be a
books.
life I could never lead. You couldn't pay me $50 million a year to be a tax attorney. Now, one question, it's a question they should have asked, is both to Burgess and Morris, is have you ever witnessed Hunter Biden paint? Now, I submitted that to the congressman and then asked, for the record, can you supplement the record today by submitting a video of Hunter Biden painting? And that's one thing we haven't got. Nobody's seen a video of Hunter Biden painting. I want to see.
Yeah, there was a dramatic difference in his skill set because we used to see the moldy bowl of milk that looked like COVID. And now there's, now there's some nice colors and things to them. So, okay, so we are going to carry on and let's get back to the transcript. So Morris is still here. So again, Kevin, just to clarify, because your attorney asked, and I want you to answer the question again, it's your testimony that in January 2020, when you first began giving loans to Hunter, there was no written loan agreement in place at that time. Is that correct? No written agreement in place. Now, we get some other questions. I want to ask a few questions for the panel, not meant to be adversarial, but these were unsecured loans. You didn't have any collateral for them. Is that right? Correct. And you executed a promissory note at some point after the transfers or the payments were made. Is that true? Yeah, there have been a bunch of promissory notes, a series of promissory notes. Yeah. Are they subject to a unified loan agreement or did you do a separate loan agreement? I don't think so. And then I just want to make sure, were these no interest loans that you're talking about in this particular paragraph? He says, no. When we did documents or promissory notes, I know it's required of a note, so yes, we do all of that. So there was interest in it. Yes. And I just want to clarify, you did, regardless of whether you accepted that, you mentioned in paragraph 17 here that we've looked at, you did pay for what I think was a $200,000 place in Venice. Is that true? Well, I don't know if that's accurate. It was monthly, so whatever it was. But you were making those payments for 10 months, weren't you? For a while, yeah, I was. And same thing with the Porsche. I understand you said it was upside down and you just caught him up on the balance, right? Yeah, I squared him up. And then there was another 1.2 million that was also mentioned here. And one thing you said a moment ago is that you had a third-party vendor or whatnot. I'm just curious, who were those people? Well, there are lots of them, third-party vendors. I don't mean that as a term of art, but there are a lot of people there. My thing is building teams. I got a big team. And so he owed, I don't know. I'm just trying to surmise from what you said. He apparently owed money, as we used to say when I was practicing all over town. Is that what you're suggesting here? I don't know. He had debts and you paid and you were paying off those debts to multiple partners. Is that fair? I don't know if there were any other debts other than his IRS IRS bill. There was, he had a divorce. And Big says, so I'm not understanding who you were making the payments to, because you apparently were paying some mortgage company for the Venice house. You paid some car loan entity for the car to catch him up. You put another 1.2 million out. Now you're suggesting just a second ago that it may have been for the IRS, but he also had a divorce. So who were you actually paying? Who was getting the money from you? The proceeds that you were paying on behalf of Hunter. I don't know. He says, I think you have a list. I need to hire a security company at the beginning because it was dangerous. And he had very little support.
Such a cop-out. In his lawsuit against us, he said he was getting threats. There's no evidence for any of this. They haven't submitted any threats that Morris or Hunter's received. It's just, the big bad Trump people, they're acting like little girls.
So he's saying that Hunter's getting threats, and apparently you're saying he's getting threats.
Yeah, that'll come up later when he calls me.
Okay. So security, divorce, IRS, any other entities? He says, well, I think a PR company. I don't know. Got to refresh my memory. He says, so you have a list somewhere, says Biggs. He says, yeah, I think so. You have it too. Biggs says, well, I personally don't have it, actually. I'd be asking you if you can verify, but I don't have it. He says, hopefully I'll get to see it. Then we can cross-check it, but I don't have it. So now we get back, page 16, Mr. Morris, let me know when you're there. He says, I'm there. Now, apparently this is back from the indictment again. So he says, okay, quote, at the same time, Hunter spent large sums to maintain his lifestyle from January to October 2020. In that period, he got financial assistance of $1.2 million from a friend. Financial support included hundreds of thousands of dollars for accountants, lawyers, his Porsche, media relations, housing. For example, Hunter spent 17 grand each month, about 200,000 for a house in Venice Beach. Now, I want to go through the different categories here, and the lawyer chimes in. Just be cautious about attorney-client stuff. Okay. So he says, beginning, Sullivan objects. I'm objecting to this, that the personal friend is him. We don't know who wrote that. So again, his name's not in the indictment, so we don't know it's him. So you're not suggesting that there's another personal friend who gave the exact same loans to Hunter, are you? No, I'm not making any suggestions like that. It's just not my client's name. Okay. Morris says, Congressman, this is a federal indictment. My name is not in it. I'm not going to comment on it. We know it's you. Is it accurate that you were paying for $17,500 each month? He says, I wasn't paying for anything. I was loaning Hunter Biden the money for things. At the time I met him, he was in danger in his house. Paparazzi was there. People were coming to his door with cameras saying, we just want to talk. People were yelling from outside the bushes, Hunter Biden, come out. Hunter Biden, come out. Melissa was 5 months pregnant at the time. So I got him security and he needed to move. And we had to find a place quickly. We had to find a place that had privacy, and we ended up with that house. And Kevin, do you have an expectation that Hunter is going to repay the money to you? Yeah. Do you have any sort of time frame? He says, there's a balloon on the note. I think it's 2025. The time frame only goes from January through October 20. We're now in 2024. Kevin, have you paid for other residences for Hunter other than the one in the federal indictment? He says, again, I haven't paid for anything. I've loaned him the money. And have you paid through loans for Hunter's rent or mortgage? I don't know the situation, whatever it is you were doing from 2020 until today. He says, no. When did you stop giving loans for Hunter Biden's residence? About a year ago, presumably after he started selling some art. So it's fair to say that you were paying for Hunter's residence up until 2023, approximately. And were the payments for Hunter's residence in the form of loans consistent with this payment? He says, the price, was it around the same price as $17,500? He says, I believe so. Now, do you recall how much you've paid to lawyers via the loans? And Sullivan says, I know it goes into the loans, but again, attorney-client privilege. You're loaning money to Hunter, right? Kevin says, yes. Now, as part of the loan to Hunter, if I were to go get a loan, you got to tell the bank why you're getting a loan. Like, I'm getting a loan for my house. I'm getting a loan for my car. So each time Hunter gets a loan, does he have to come to you to get the loan? He says, Hunter doesn't ask. Hunter doesn't come to me. He's never asked for anything. I've done these things voluntarily. I have an idea of what they were, and I keep a record. And the ones that are absolutely necessary, I take care of with a loan. So do you give him like an allowance? Like you give him $1 million a year and he just goes and pays off whatever debts he has? Or do you pay the third-party vendor yourself and keep track of the loan? How does it work? Kevin says, I'm glad you asked this, counsel. I don't loan Hunter, corrects himself. I don't loan Hunter Biden cash or amounts of money. Hunter Biden, I've loaned for things that are acute. And he has been basically unemployed without a source of income for the entire time I've known him, except for those $50,000 paintings that he sold to Naftali.
I want to underline that because he blew through all the Chinaman cash. This guy's a total decrepit. And Joe said so the smartest man the U.S. president knows from a pure intellectual capacity has been basically unemployed for the entire time Kevin Morris has known him.
Right. And
what does he do all day?
And he was also making $83,000 a month, I believe it was, right, from the Ukraine Burisma stuff. So he had a ton of money that is all now gone. Okay, I'm going to take just 2 seconds. I'm going to restart a stream on locals. We're going to restart our locals stream and let me...
Sounds good. Do I need to get off?
No, you're good to go. I'm just telling you what I'm doing, which is why I'm not. So we're back on the transcripts. So the question to Kevin Morris. So have you paid millions of dollars for Hunter Biden's legal fees via loans? Again, he says, that's attorney-client relationship. And they talk about that breaks the privilege. And yet I'm also going to call, so the attorneys are getting into this. So my question is, has Mr. Morris ever disclosed to anyone who's not a part of their legal team how much money he's paid in legal fees? Would that breach the privilege? Then that would break the privilege and it's moot. So, and just, I don't know the answer, but can you talk with him and see? I'm also going to call Hunter's other lawyer as well. Maybe it's a good time for us to take a break now. And they update the record. Dan Goldman's in the house. And here we go. Chairman Smith from House Ways and Means Committee is now asking some questions. Mr. Smith says, Mr. Morris, thanks for being here today. Could you please describe your business relationship with Viacom?
We were behind these questions. We wanted to get to the bottom of this. There was a public merger that went south and somebody was forced to pay $200 million. And he has a relationship with Viacom. So we just wanted to get him on the record, because if anything comes out later on, we have him on the record.
Amazing. So the question goes to Morris. He responds, Viacom owns MTV. MTV owns Comedy Central. And therefore they were the other side for me for a long time on a lot of different things, but I certainly don't work for Viacom. You never work for Viacom? No. You ever spoken to Hunter or Joe or any other member about Viacom? I'm sorry, Mr. Smith, can we break that up? Well, let's say he does. Have you ever spoken to Joe Biden, any member of the Biden administration, about the merger with Viacom? No. How many times have you been to the White House since Joe has been president? Twice? Only twice. And he says, I was at a picnic last year. I didn't go into the White House, but I was at the 4th of July picnic. So 3 times? Yeah. And what were those 3 visits for? So not 2, 3. And one was, the first one, 2021, Hunter took me to the White House to let me see it and give me a little tour. Did you talk to President Biden when you were there? At the end of the day, we were in the outside area. Hunter's friendly with a lot of people there. And when it was around 5 or 6 o'clock, Hunter went in and said hi. And the president waved. And I think he said hi. He always makes jokes about my hair. I think he made a crack about my hair. That was it. So that was your first time. What was your second time? Second time, I was at Naomi's wedding. At the White House? At the White House. Did you talk to Biden? Oh, just a quick hello. Probably talking about the weather. Okay. Have you helped out any other individual to the degree that you've helped out Hunter Biden? Have you ever gotten into this and done this before? Morris says, Congressman Kevin, I've had clients for 25 years. I've helped them out in a lot of ways. A lot of ways. A lot of clients, a lot of ways. You ever to the level of $5 million? I've helped my clients to the extent of their needs. Very lawyerly answers there. Has there ever been anyone that you've given more than $5 million for? Not that I can recall. Okay, says Jason Smith. No other questions. Big says, are we getting close to wrapping up? Because I do want to go back to the privilege question before. Now I want to understand the assertion of privilege that you're trying to make. Now, I'm not trying to be adversarial here, but I just want to know. I'm trying to understand. So what we're seeing here is you paid ostensibly some attorney's fees that Hunter was accruing because he had a different lawyer representing him on different matters. Is that fair? He says, counsel, I don't know how you have it. I've made a document production in conjunction with the grand jury investigation. I don't know where and he cuts him off. He says, look, I'm not a part of the grand jury, so I'm asking questions for this interview, for this transcribed interview today. So answer me. So Hunter Biden has a different attorney for different matters, a series of different matters. Is that fair? Yeah. And you let Hunter money to pay those attorney's fees. Is that fair? Yeah, that's what's been characterized here today. He said, well, that's a little oversimplified, says Kevin. Various attorneys had various fee agreements and I paid lawyers. Sure. On behalf of Hunter, though. Yes. And those would go to that, the series of notes that you've mentioned earlier. Correct. Is that fair? Yeah. Now you're writing checks to Hunter's attorneys directly because you've said that's how you did it. You were paying these third parties directly. Is that fair? Yeah. Okay. So really the privilege, the attorney-client privilege here that you're trying to assert is null because the attorney-client privilege exists between Hunter and Hunter's lawyers, not between you and Hunter's lawyers. You understand that? No, I don't understand that. Lawyer jumps in. He says, I don't understand that my attorney-client privilege or Hunter's, is distinguished by having other attorneys. No. I'm not saying that because in the matters that you're representing him on those legal matters, yeah, if you're representing him, absolutely you've got privilege. But what you're asserting here is that when you're writing checks to another attorney, the other attorney has the privilege. And what you're saying is get you to dovetail into their privilege. The lawyer jumps in. We've acknowledged that he's paid. He's already loaned money. I know, but I redact the amount that's been paid. And I do think that is privilege, says Morris's lawyer. Okay, but you understand what I'm saying is that the privilege actually exists between Hunter's lawyer, which is Kevin, Mr. Biden's attorney on that matter. And Biggs continues, I would assert that to you that the privilege does not exist between what Mr. Morris paid because he's the third party now and he doesn't have privilege to hide that stuff. Lawyer says, but he's also the attorney for Hunter and he knows about it. And so they're fighting over this. Morris jumps in. Look, Congressman, I didn't pay for any anything. I loan Hunter Biden money, number one. He says, well, you wrote the check. He says, number two, I think we're getting into a debate over the definition of privilege. And you know, you and I can debate that all day long. This is fair enough. He says, it is a bit of debate. Well, the only reason is because you're refusing to answer the question. Bishop jumps in. I'm pursuing that with one more. Mr. Morris, Chairman Smith asked you a question about whether you talked to Hunter about the Viacom merger. Was the Viacom merger within the subject of your representation of Hunter? He said, actually, I got to carve that out. I had said to carve that out. And so the question was whether he spoke with Joe or the White House. That's why I'm pursuing this question. Was the Viacom merger subject matter of your attorney-client relationship with Hunter? Morris says, I would argue that it was. He says, let's hear him out. He says, there have been a lot of ridiculous rumors about what I've done. That one is the most ridiculous. I was not involved in any way with Viacom's merger. It's not something I do. It's not something that they would talk to me about.
We didn't
Okay.
see that. For the record, we don't think we're not saying that he's directly involved.
The better notice he didn't say that I've never discussed it. He said I'm not involved in the merger. So it still leaves him some wiggle room.
What's the background on the merger? Are you familiar with that? What's the conflict
so
here?
The conflict concerns the largest termination fee in U.S. corporate history because the merger between Simon & Schuster and Penguin Random House fell through. And if they had a clause in the attempted merger that if it didn't, one party had to pay the other $200 million. And so the question is, was Morris involved in any way with the U.S. government's decision to intervene? Because the U.S. DOJ blocked the merger and it went to trial, and Joe oversees that DOJ. So that's the question. We have no proof of Morris's involvement. That's why they asked questions, and he was offended by the question.
Okay, great background. Thank you for that. So Bishop says, okay, so it's not within your attorney-client relationship. I'm trying to test this attorney-client privilege conversation. Bishop says, you don't contend that the Viacom merger, was within the subject of your attorney-client relationship with Biden, do you? He says, yeah, I don't deny that. So you don't deny? He says, it's just kind of semantics. Did he seek your advice with respect to Viacom? And Sullivan is still battling on this. Goldman jumps in, says, we're going to pause the majority's time. Goldman jumps in, Dan. He says, okay, just because you're going to discuss this at the break, I think what would be helpful for us is to understand if you're acting as Hunter's lawyer, then you get attorney-client privilege. So I think we need to understand exactly what the relationship was in terms of your representation. And they're just making sure the record is clear. There are other expenses here, Kevin, that you've paid for. Have you paid for Hunter Biden via loans for his accountants, for example? Yes, I have. How much have you paid for Hunter's accountants? He says, I can't remember. It was a lot. Millions? No. Hundreds of thousands? Not millions. I don't recall. Not millions, though. It felt like millions.
That's funny. He
That is
only
funny.
remembers those expenses that get into the millions.
Yeah, it felt like, sure. I mean, it's like another one, another thing. It's like he bit off a lot more than he can chew. And he's going to want to get something for this, right? I mean, you would imagine like there's going to be a benefit at some point. Whatever that is, we'll see if we can figure it out. But the question to him says, and then the other category that the indictment has identified is media relationships. Can you tell us what you paid for loans? He says, look, counsel, I'm not admitting or denying or making any comment about this indictment. You know, I talked about the accountant, but I can't characterize the indictment. I can't answer these questions, and you understand that. He says, it wasn't my question, though. My question is, did you, via loans, pay for any payments to a media relations company on behalf of Hunter? You did tie it to the indictment because what I will say is yes. Well, the reason I'm using the indictment is because you've provided us with no list of the different payments that you've made out. We sent a scope of the topics. You knew what we were going to be talking about, but you did not come with anything laid out describing what you paid. So that's why we're using the indictment. And if you don't like it, then you can just give us the answers. Now, I would like to turn to Exhibit 2. This is the Delaware plea colloquy between Hunter Biden and the U.S. District Court. So this was from the bad plea deal that went awry, which Hunter should have taken that deal, man. It's going to get much worse for him now, but
I agree. It would have put the ball back in the government's court.
Totally. And then he could have made a lot of these same arguments that I've already pled guilty. I'm already immunized from all of the other charges. Yeah, now he's got a lot of bravado out there and the DOJ doesn't like that. So they go back to the colloquy and they get some copies out there. Morris says, look, I'm a transactional attorney, okay? Happily, I haven't been in court for 25 years. You know, it doesn't mean anything that I haven't been in court other than as a transactional attorney. And his lawyer jumps in and says, and general counsel, don't forget. He says, oh yeah, and general counsel. But many, as you know, a lot of lawyers make deals and they don't go to court. Now, background, this is the plea colloquy with Hunter in Delaware. I'm going to read on the record. He says, the court says, all right, now there are references to taxes. This is the court reading, paid by a third party on Mr. Biden's behalf. $955,000 here, $956,000 here, $492,000 in 2016, $197,000, 2019. Says, well, just looking at 2017 and 2018, we got more than $1.9 million there. That's a lot of money. Question to Kevin. Did you pay for Hunter Biden via a loan on any of Hunter's taxes that were owed to a different state and federal agency? He says, yeah, I did, yes. And in this plea colloquy, it's almost $1 million times 2. Did you pay those amounts? He says, well, I don't believe so. I think these numbers are right. I'm not sure though, because I believe there were, this is a little sneaky. There was substantial, I believe, $800,000 of penalties and interest that Hunter had to pay at the time. Okay, but that would be the total payment, including the taxes he owed plus the penalties and interest. But as you said, these could have been penalties and other interest by the IRS. Well, I don't know if that's including these numbers, but I don't want to be difficult. But you paid these amounts on behalf of Hunter. Yeah, look, I think this is about right. I can't say this is exactly right without going back and look at my numbers, but we can proceed. And then the next clause says $492,000 in 2016, $197,000 in 2019. Does that sound right? He says, well, this is written sloppily. I didn't pay anything, and he's using the pay again. I didn't pay anything in 2016, and I believe when we voluntarily add this up in 2021, it was multiple tax years. I can't remember. Do you recall paying $200,000 for 2019? Just to clarify, was this the amount that was paid? He says yes. Are these the only 4 years of the tax liability you covered? So Jim Jordan says, okay, it's 16, 17, 18, and 19. Is that right? He says, yeah, I think that's right. Did you pay any other years? 15? Morris says, I can check that, Congressman, but I'm just curious if it's only the 4 years, because he also had a tax liability in 15 as well, right? Morris says, yeah, that's what I understand. And the amount of money that you've loaned to Biden, is it all in one vehicle to speak? Is it sort of a tab that you're just adding to? He says, well, there's a number of promissory notes in there. And are you able to give us a little bit more clarity about these notes? Can you help us understand? Oh, I can't really remember. If there's a number of promissory notes over the years, my lawyers and his lawyers, they've been careful to take care about it. I don't know. Maybe some were specifically of tax payments. I'm not sure. Maybe some were for periods of time, that was squared up. And now we're looking at more of the colloquy. Look down, I'll read this for you. 1.5 million was total income, and they're talking about the plea deal. Do you recall making a payment to the IRS for 45 grand? I don't remember. He says, when Hunter decided to voluntarily, to pay when we did, we just asked for the tab. We asked how much. So I'm a little rusty about the numbers. Question for you from Miss Van Dunn. You mentioned earlier that you were an art collector. Did you ever purchase any of Hunter's art? Yeah. How many? Oh, a number of paintings over the last 4 years. And do you remember how much you paid for those? I'm sorry? How much you paid for those? Yes. Is it something you can share with us? Well, it's complicated. Okay. It was a little complicated, but I bought, shortly after I first met Hunter, I bought 2 paintings, I believe for $40. And then it's been reported I bought a lot, not a lot, of 11 paintings. Not a lot, but a lot, of 11 paintings. I think that's our time. The hour is up. We can take 10, 15-minute break and then call it. 15-minute break, that would give you time to call Mr. Lowell. Yeah, okay, and they go off the record. Now the minority Democrats say, thank you for appearing today, as we're back on the record. So the majority's over.
One question that a member of the audience asked that is relevant is what Morris did to make all this money and how he can do this, right? Well, he has been for over 2 decades the lawyer for the creators of South Park, and he gets a cut of every episode that South Park is on Comedy Central. So we're talking tens of millions of dollars.
Yeah,
so
and that's
he made his money off South Park.
And that's going to be basically in perpetuity, right? So every time that they play a South Park episode, this guy gets a cut.
Syndication, yes, sir. And he also represents Matthew McConaughey and a couple of other actors.
So he just got money to burn and
deals.
He's doing it.
And
he's doing it. Okay, so this was, I think, the majority of this. The rest of this is kind of the minority. And so they take a break. They come back. Mr. Morris and the minority's back, and they go through the same thing, right? It's the same shtick. It's everything's above board. Hunter's a nice guy, and he was just doing what he needed to do to help him get back on track.